Hi everyone, and welcome to my course, Rigging in Harmony for Animators. This is a great course if you want to dive a little deeper into the rigging tools that Harmony has to offer. So as an animator, I find knowing how rigs work can be very valuable. Not only will it speed up your animation process, but it makes it a lot easier to troubleshoot problems and gives you more control over the rigs in general. So in this course, we'll be building this character here. His name is Bruno. I'm making this character for a personal project that I'm working on. So it should be a great exercise to really go through all of the steps in creating a flipped 360 character rig. You can see we have the basic turnaround here, and you'll have access to this turnaround in the exercise files. Now for this course, I'm assuming you have some basic knowledge of how to use Toon Boom, like adding drawings and pegs and so on. But if you're a complete beginner, don't worry. Just take your time and follow at your own pace. We'll break this up into small steps, so it shouldn't be too hard to follow along. So I'm excited to get going. Let's open a fresh Harmony file and start building this rig. So I have a brand new Harmony scene open. Yours may look slightly different depending on what windows you have active. It doesn't have to be exactly like mine, but you obviously need your camera view, the node view, and the timeline all open. If you don't see any of these views, go up to Window and select whichever one is missing. Let's have a look at our node view now. So the first thing we can do is delete this default drawing node and the right node as well. Then we can grab and move these slightly off center. Selecting the node view, we can press Enter to search for some nodes. Let's type in color card and plug that in. We can select this yellow square and lock it. And now it'll be a little bit easier to see what we're doing. So before we import our reference image, it's going to be a good idea to set some preferences that will make our lives a lot easier. So let's go to Edit and select Preferences. So under the General tab, it's important to have Focus on Mouse Enter checked, and also Default Separate Positions for Pegs. Next, we can go to our Timeline and make sure Reduce Indentation is checked. That's going to really clean up our timeline and make it easier to see. And finally, under Advanced, we can check Support Overlay and Underlay Arts. We can check Advanced Display. And we need to make sure that this right here is unchecked. So Element Node, Animate Using Animation Tools is unchecked. This is super important because it makes sure that we only select our pegs when we're animating and not our drawing nodes. And with our preferences set, we can press OK, and Toon Boom should automatically save those preferences. Now let's import our reference image. You should have this from the exercise files. Just save the PNG somewhere on your computer. So I'll go to File, Import, Images, and go to Browse. I saved mine in my Downloads file. You see the Bruno reference PNG right here. Here, let's create a single layer. We'll keep it as the original bitmap, and all these are fine as well. Let's press OK. You'll see it pops up in our node view. I want to resize this though. So let's select our node, press Ctrl P to add a peg on top. So now I can scale this up as much as I want. That should be good. Notice on the timeline, a keyframe was made as well. So for a reference, it's very important to match this up with the center of our camera. We can do that by pressing this button right here. And you can see we have a nice big X in the center. I want to choose a part of the character. I usually choose the pelvis and line it up with this center position. Selecting my peg, I can use the Shift and arrow keys to move my reference image here. Let's move it up a little bit. It doesn't matter if it's off the screen, that's okay. And I'll line it up just like that. Now I'm going to go to my next frame, press F6 to make a keyframe, and now I'll do the same thing with the other view. So I'll match the pelvis roughly in the same spot to that X. Right, we can zoom in to make sure it's pretty precise. Let's do our profile view now. somewhere like that. And finally, our last view, our quarterback, like this. Now we can cycle through the views and our character turns. Now you may notice we don't have a full back view. That's kind of just to save time. We can use our front view as a model for that after. The next thing we can do is go to our peg and lock it, so now we can't accidentally move our reference. Now if you go to your timeline and press this button here, you'll see you have an opacity slider as well. I like to take this down to maybe around 85, maybe a little more. Let's do 65. Our reference is in. Now we can start drawing our artwork. Before we start drawing, it's a good idea to figure out how we want our brush to behave. If this was a studio, things like brushes and palettes, that would already be decided for us. But since we're working on our own, we gotta do it ourselves. So we're going to be drawing the pieces of our character with these shape tools. They're a little more precise than just freehand with the pencil, and it's going to be a lot easier if we need to edit or change things later. So if we click this, our tool properties should show up. If you don't see this tool properties window, just go to Window and select Tool Properties down here. I'm going to go with a fixed line weight just to keep things simple and minimize that distortion if we start deforming things. But what I do need is two different sizes for my brush. I want to have thicker lines on the outside and thinner lines on the inside. So with our line tool selected, I have my fixed thickness brush. 3 is a pretty good size, but for my thinner lines, I want it to be 2. We're going to have to set up a new brush preset. I'm going to select this arrow over here, and this menu will pop up. I'm just going to change the maximum size to 2, and I'm going to leave everything else the same. I can press this button here and say New Brush Preset, and we can name it. Just like that. And we can see it pops up right here. That's going to save us a lot of time switching back and forth. Now it's time for the palette. Let's find our color window. If you don't see it, go to Window, Color. Notice we have a default palette with some colors in it. I'm going to delete this because we don't really need it. And let's create a new palette for our character. All a palette is, it's like a bucket where you keep the individual colors that you're going to use for your rig. So we'll press this plus button here at the top to create a new palette. We'll call it Bruno 00. Okay. You'll see if we switch back, the colors inside change. These are two different buckets of colors. So now we'll come to the bottom window and just press this plus key a couple times. And this gives us a whole bunch of colors that we can work with. Now we can double click right on the side and change the color and the name. So now we can look at each piece of our rig and kind of match the color with that piece. We just have to remember to bring the opacity up so we get the true color. So I'll double click and I'll say Skin. I'll grab this eyedropper and select the skin. And it matches that color. Next we'll do the shirt. Match the shirt. Next we'll do the pants. Match the pants. And we're going to do the same thing for all the elements that we can see. Here's one for the hair. Here's one for the shoes. And there's two different colors to the shoes. So I'm going to select that one as well and just call it Shoes 2. Do the eyebrows. The eye whites. And the pupils are just going to be black. There's also some elements that we can't see, like the inside of the mouth, the teeth. We'll make those white. and the tongue. The last colors we can add are a few super bright colors. You may be thinking, why do we need these? These are just going to be for handles and cutters, just in case I need them when I'm making my rig. And I can delete these last two colors. Now remember, we can add as many colors as we want throughout the process, so it doesn't really matter. And notice as well, we group things in terms of piece rather than color. So even though these two are the same color, they each have their own separate swatch. And that's just so we can change the color of one without affecting the color of the other. That's super, super important. Okay, let's set the opacity back to our node view, and now we're ready to start drawing. Also notice that I made some markings on my rig. This is just me thinking about how I want to tackle creating this character. Looking at the pieces of the hair, or where I want the joints to be. Making a note of important points that I need to be aware of. Now this doesn't have to look perfect, and it's not set in stone, so don't feel handcuffed by your design, but it's a good idea to take a moment and come up with a plan of action. Take a look at the design and think what parts you're going to need, which parts are going to give you the most problems, or which parts do you need to pay most attention to. Now that we've thought about our design and we have a better plan of action, let's actually start building this rig. We're going to start drawing the pieces of the head. In our node view, if we press Ctrl R, we're going to add a couple new drawing layers. We can make sure Extend Exposure is checked so all the drawings show up for the whole scene. That's super, super helpful. So here, we can just take a look at our head and type in the pieces that we need. So I'm going to start with the head, and if we press Add, you notice our nodes pop up here, but this doesn't close, so we can just keep typing, and it's very, very fast. So we'll do the jaw. We can even just press Enter, right? And you'll see the jaw pops up. What else do we need? We need a nose. I'm just going to do one eye because we can copy and paste the other. We need one pupil. We need an eyebrow. And this is kind of just the basics. We can add nodes whenever we want. This is just to get us started. And I think I'll do one ear. We can also just do one node for the hair. We're definitely going to need more pieces, but for now, that'll be just a placeholder. And so let's select all of these nodes. We'll grab them. We can press this button here to kind of spread them out. And now we want to attach them to a comp. So you can just copy these comps. We'll plug it in. You can rename this to head comp to keep this organized. If you have a lot of nodes to plug in as well, you can kind of add a little underscore like this. And then the comp gets a little bit bigger, so it's easier to see. Now we have a lot of nodes. We can select them all and hold the Alt key and select our comp. And just like that, they're all plugged in at the same time. In stage 2, I also like to add the pegs. So we'll select everything and press Ctrl-Shift-P. Each one has its own peg and it's correctly named as well. What I'm also going to do is I'm going to create another comp with Ctrl-H, plug this in, and then I'll take my eye nodes, plug them into that comp. Because I'm going to be grouping these later, and it's going to be a lot easier if they're all plugged into the same composite. We can name this Eye Comp. In Toon Boom, things that are plugged in on the left side are going to be in front of things that are plugged in on the right side. So right now my nose is going to be in front of every single element. That's a problem because my eyes are behind everything. So I'll just move my eyes in front of my jaw. I can make space for these and just move these in the middle so we're a little more organized. I know I've said this in the past couple of videos, but our nodes are set up and now we can actually start drawing. Okay, cool. So let's start drawing the head shape. Remember, we're going to be using our shape tool because it's more precise and it's going to be easier if we need to make adjustments later. We'll go to the tool properties, press the brush that we made in the last video, and we're ready to start drawing. So we can just start drawing a square here. With the shape tool, you can use the black selection arrow to select your shape and kind of adjust it like this. Or the white selection arrow, the contour editor, to select the points and move them individually. If you hold Control, you can add a point and just drag it down to where you want. And if you hold Alt and kind of drag on this point, you'll notice these handles appear to adjust the line even further. Our character is symmetrical, so we're going to adjust just to half of the face. So now we can cut this and kind of paste it on the other side. So we'll come up here to our cutter. In the tool properties, we'll make sure our tip style is set to round. And we can even select the marquee selection up here. And then we'll make a big selection, maybe around, I don't know, halfway roughly. And we'll just delete the other half. We'll go to our selection tool, select everything, Control C, Control V, just regular copy paste, and we'll hold Shift, press up arrow once, and then the left arrow once. Now it's exactly where it should be. We can flip this in the tool properties with this button over here. Nice. And we'll just move that in place with the arrow keys. Right? It's roughly lined up. Change back to the lasso select, and you'll notice it's two separate pieces. So let's try and combine this to one piece. Let's turn on the snapping. So snap to contour, and we'll do snap and align. With our contour editor, we'll press K to see the lines. And we'll kind of just zoom in real tight, select the point, and kind of move it until it snaps into place. Now for the bottom, we'll zoom in really close, select one, snaps right into place just like that. Select everything and press this button right here in the tool properties. That's merging the lines together. So now, right, these are one piece. This is one shape. It doesn't have to be perfect. We can even just go in and kind of adjust these points as well. There you go. Let's add kind of a rounded part to the top of the head. So we can take our ellipse tool and see we still have our snapping turned on. We'll see these little lines show up. If you hold Alt and Shift and press and drag, we kind of drag the circle from the center. Right, and we're going to go right until it's about to overlap with those lines. Right, we want to zoom in real close to be pretty precise. We can turn off the snapping for now. I'm just adjusting it until we have these points, right? Until these points are overlapping just like this. It's not perfect, but it's pretty close. So now with our cutter tool, we can kind of, if you hold T and just swipe through the lines, we can kind of cut these lines away. And since we overlap them so tight, they have a pretty clean cut. I'll kind of zoom in too. Maybe I'll select my contour editor and delete those. Just delete these extra points. Come into the other side. Just want to delete these outside points. Right? And that kind of cleans it up there. For here, we'll turn on our snapping again and do that same trick. There you go. Oops, that's not. Now we can select our whole head again, and we'll just merge everything. So now it's one big piece. And the last thing we can do, we can select the contour editor, select these shapes, and just press Shift down on the arrow key a little bit to kind of drop the head down. Okay, perfect. So we have the head outline. Let's do the eye now. I'm just going to grab these nodes, and just spread them out a bit more so I have some space. I can even go add a couple underscores here and make my comp a little bit bigger. So doing the eye, we need to pay attention to which drawing layer that we're working on. And all these are, it's a way to separate these nodes into even more pieces. So on the eye, we're going to make sure we're on our line art layer, this little L over here. We'll hold Alt-Shift and kind of draw the eye to match what we have. Now on the pupil, we're going to use the same ellipse tool. But instead of the line art color, we're going to use the pupil color. Just like that. So the pupil, we can fill right on our line art layer. So we're just going to fill that in. But for the eye, we want to fill on the color art layer instead. So we'll press this button here, create color art from line art, and now when we go on our color art layer, with our eye white color, we can just simply fill that in. So now we have a pupil, but the problem is it goes outside of the eye. We want it to stay inside all the time. So to solve this, we need a cutter. So let's press Enter on the node view, type in cutter, and just grab that. So what we want to cut is the pupil, so we're going to put the cutter with Alt underneath the pupil. Let's see what happens when we plug in the eye. So we want to cut with the eye, so we'll plug it in right here. Oh, it disappeared. That's just because we need to invert it. We'll just double click this black mask, and as you can see, the pupil shows up again. So what happens when we move it around? Okay, so we're halfway there, right? As you can see, the pupil no longer goes outside of the eye. But the problem is, this line cuts through the pupil. That's not a good look. So how do we fix that? Remember those art layers from before? We're going to go back in our node view, press Enter, and look for a line art and a color art layer. Right, we'll plug them in and replace them in our comp. So it may look like nothing has changed, but now we can move these layers around to be in front or behind one another. So I'm going to move the line art in front of my pupil. And now when I move my pupil, you'll see that black line is always in front of it. And that's exactly what we want. So we'll cut this with the color art instead. And we have our eye pretty much set up. I'll select these pegs and just press Ctrl-P. We can rename this like front eye. We'll do it in caps. And this way, I can move both pieces or each piece individually. Let's actually plug in the eyebrow to there as well. But before we do the eyebrow, we need to make some eyelids. Let's press Ctrl-R to add a new drawing layer. We'll say lid top. Just press add, and then we'll do lid bottom. Add and close. Select both, Ctrl-Shift-P to give them their own pegs. And let's plug them in here. So now I want a peg to move both eyelids. So let's press Ctrl-P. We'll rename this Eyelids. And then we'll plug our other eyelid into it. So now we can move both of these at the same time. And then we'll plug this into the full eye. So now we can move the eye, the pupil, and the eyelids all at once, or we can move the pieces separately. Let's draw in the artwork now. So on our bottom lid, we have the line art here. I'm just going to draw sort of a square, just like that. And on the color art layer, let's fill it with our skin color. So we'll create color art from line art, and then we'll fill that in. So looking at this, I probably want this to be a little bit bigger. So to select my line art and color art, I'm going to press this button here. It selects all the art layers underneath the one that you're currently on. So I'll grab this and I'll scale it up just a little bit. There you go. So if I keep this checked, I can select this, press Ctrl C, and go to my lid top and press Ctrl V, and it will paste it on the appropriate layers. So I just move this up. Now we have two eyelids. So for these lids, we're going to add some deformers on them. I'm going to select these pegs, move them up a bit, and I'll select my bottom lid. This is a very easy way to do it. The deformers we're going to be adding are called envelope deformers. So we just go over to Animation, go to Envelope Creator, Create Envelope. At the top, this is how many points we want. 4 points should be good. We'll press Create Envelope. Right? I can rename this so it's a little bit smaller. There you go. And now if we go to Animate mode, and we select these deformers, we can move our artwork around. Do the same thing to the top lid. Animation, create envelope, same thing. And it gives us like a perfect envelope deformer. Super easy. While I'm here, I can turn these off for a second. I also want to add an envelope on the eye. So it's a circle, so you'll notice it's a little bit different. So when we go to add our points, we'll create 4. And it's okay, right? It's actually pretty good. But if we wanted to, we could adjust this with this tool up here, this hammer and wrench. Then we can kind of move these points and adjust it if we wanted to. Okay, so now the obvious problem is we want our eyelids to appear inside our eye as well. And if we think back to what we did with the pupil, we can do the exact same thing. Now to save some space, instead of having 3 different cutters, I want to just use one. I'm going to create a composite, Control H, and I'll plug my bottom lid, I'll plug my top lid, and then I'll even plug my pupil into it. Now we'll plug this composite back into the main eye, so it all appears again. And we're going to take this cutter, hold Alt, and we'll shove it right underneath our new composite. Okay, and this time we just plug the color art back in, and now everything is cut inside the eye, which is what we want. The problem is, obviously, the line art is behind everything, so we'll just move it in front, and there we go. Now we have our eyelids and our pupil inside the eye. Now before we move on to the eyebrow, we got to adjust these pivot points, because if you notice, when we select our pupil or our lid, the pivot point is all the way down here, right? And we don't want that. So for this, we need our advanced animation toolbar, right? That's this thing up here. If you don't see it, go to Window, Toolbars, Advanced Animation, make sure that's checked. We'll select this Rotate tool. And now when we select the eye, you'll notice we can move this pivot point to wherever we want it. And when we have this selected, it's going to be a permanent change, so this pivot point will always be where we put it. So for the eye, I'm going to put the pivot point here. I'm going to turn these off for a second so I can see my pupil. I'm going to grab that pivot point. I'll put it somewhere right in the middle. or maybe just a little lower so it's easier to grab. For our top lid, see when we step up, we press B, we'll step up to the peg. I'm going to move the top lid somewhere on the top of the eye. The bottom lid is going to be at the bottom of the eye. And then for both lids, I'll have the pivot point somewhere in the middle. Okay? For this front eye, I want to have the same pivot information as this one. So if we press this yellow box, you'll see that our pivot point information is stored right down here. So I'll press this box over there. You'll see it's different, right? So I'm just going to copy and paste the information from one to the other. And now you'll see that it has the same pivot point, which is good. If you're following along, just get up to this point, your eyelids and your pupil is made, and it's all cut within the eye. Let's draw in our eyebrow. Just like our eye, I want to separate these art layers. But instead of a line in color, I want my line art, and I want my underlay. We'll plug those in. We'll move them down, just like that. So I'm going to grab my eyebrow color, and on my line art, let's start drawing in our eyebrow shape. We'll have this rectangle. To keep things simple, I'm going to change it a little bit from the design and just keep the eyebrows as a rectangles. Line there as well. And we'll use our pencil editor to select and just taper that in. Fill on the same layer. And now if we move our eyebrow, see I already changed the pivot position. It's looking okay. Now I want to make sure when we drop this eyebrow down, I want it to cut the top of the eye as well. And that's where our underlay layer is going to come in handy. So I'm going to select this on our line art, go to our underlay, and paste with Control V. I'll press K so I can see the strokes. And we'll go to our paint bucket tool and press this invisible stroke. I'll make sure this is checked in the tool properties, so that just means we can draw straight lines. And I'm going to start drawing these invisible lines. So you won't be able to see these lines, but you can fill them with color, which is super useful. So roughly here, I'll cut the excess lines. Here, I'll delete that. Delete that line. And now we're going to fill with our cutter color, that weird green that we did at the beginning. Okay, perfect. The last thing we need to do is get rid of the black eyebrow on the underlay layer. So I'm going to select these points. We'll just delete them. And even this one. I can go to my drawing view to get a better picture of what's on my drawing layer. And I want to get rid of all the black. Perfect. So now we have green on the underlay and black on the line art. We select the eyebrow now. So everything the green touches, it's going to cut the eye. And I want to cut the eye, the pupil, and the lids. So just like we grouped these three nodes, we're going to do the same thing. I'll create a composite, and I'll plug everything into this composite. So my eye, my pupil, and my lids go in here, and then I'll plug it back in. This way, when I add a cutter underneath, I'll cut everything at once. I'll take my underlay layer, because that's where my green fill is, and I'll cut everything like that. So now, you'll see the eye kind of disappears until the green runs out and we see the eye again. That's perfect. Now let's add a deformer. We're going to add this one manually. So make sure you have a deformation toolbar up here. We can go to Window, Toolbars, Deformation. We'll click this hammer and wrench. We'll make sure in Tool Properties our envelope deformer is set. Make sure we're clicking on the eyebrow, and now we can kind of just click and drag to the center. And same thing, click and drag to the center. It's not perfect, we can adjust these points. We can just move them just like that. Right, and when the deformers are red, it means they're like in edit mode. And then when they're green, it means they're in animate mode. And you can kind of see that it's kind of breaking a little bit, but if we go into our render view, which is this like blue flower, you'll see that the breaks aren't happening there, so it's okay. So we can go here, we can cut the eye, and it looks great. Now what we want to do is we want to group this eye, and that's because we're going to be copying it over for the other eye. Grouping just makes it a lot easier if we need to come back in and make some edits later. And we'll see that in action in the next video. So I'm going to take my master eye peg that controls the whole eye, and I'm just going to move it up a little bit. I want to select everything else underneath, including my eye composite down here. With everything selected, I'll just press Control G, and just like that, we have a group. So if we go inside this group, all our nodes are exactly there. It's just being fed inside with this multi-port in, and then all these cables are going outside with this multi-port out. Follow our peg on top. You'll see that it goes inside the group. It kind of branches off to each of these pegs, and then it comes outside of the group from the bottom. Let's rename this to front eye. And we'll just add a peg, a P on that. How do we copy this eye? We can't just copy and paste these nodes with Control C and V, because if we have any animation, then the animation will copy over and it won't really work. So what we want to do is press Control C and then Control B, just like this. So what we're doing now is called like a paste special. And there's a whole bunch of options that we can check. Now I think if you're in a studio, you can ask like your supervisors or whatever what the proper settings are for that project. But for us, we can kind of just press Create Columns and reuse existing elements. So what this kind of does, it makes sure that if we have different drawing swaps, we can have them in both eyes. Let's just press OK. Right? Just like that, we have our second eye. I'm going to plug that right in to the comp. And you see nothing happen because it's in the exact same spot, right? But it's there. Now we need to flip it to be in its other position. Now you may just say, okay, I'll just press 4 and I'll flip like this. Boom, easy, right? But let's say we need to reset these pegs. So like with R, if we go to this peg and press R, it flips back to its original position. And we don't want that. We want the original position to be this flipped eye. How we're going to do that is with a static transformation. We can just shorten it like that. There we go. Okay, so it's pretty cool how this works. So let's say we flip the eye again. We'll flip it and we'll move it right into the position we want. Okay, just like that. This time, we'll plug in the static transformation underneath that peg. And we'll go into these properties. And we'll say Bake Immediate Parent Transformation. Just like that. Press OK. You'll think, oh my god, what happened? My peg disappeared. Don't panic, the peg's still there. It just flipped back. So we need to press this peg and press R to reset it to its default position. And as you can see, it's back to where it should be. We just need to go up and change the pivot point, right, roughly over here. And now we have two eyes in the proper position. So if I move this around and I press R, it goes back to its default state. So we basically cloned this eye, and that is really, really helpful because now we did half the amount of work and it looks just as good. We're back in our original eye. And looking at it, there are a few things that we can change or that we need to change. The first problem is, if these lids are below the eye like this, there's no real way to select them in this camera view. As an animator, I'd have to go in and select the node view and then select these eyelids, and that's pretty annoying. So let's find a way to select them right from the camera view. And the way we do that is with a handle. So I'm going to start on my bottom lid, and I'll be on my overlay art layer. I'll select my shape tool, and then we will do our handle color. I'm going to draw the handle here. I'll just line it up. I want it to be pretty small so it doesn't get in the way. You can put your handles anywhere, and they can be whatever shape you want. I'll make mine a little bigger. And then I'll fill it with that same color. I can copy this drawing, go onto my lid top on the overlay, and paste it, and then just move it up. So now I have two handles that we can click. The problem is, they're still getting cut by the eye. So I need to separate the overlay from the rest of the art layers. So I could create a composite, move it to the front, I'll plug these lids in, right? And maybe I'll filter it with an overlay. Okay, that kind of helps, right? The overlay is now in front, which is good. I can select it. I'll step up to my peg and then we can move it. Problem with this is if I go to my render view, I can see those purple squares, and I don't want to see them, right? You may think I can just use my visibility node and then turn off the soft render. But as you can see, it doesn't fix the problem. That's because we filtered the overlay here, but these lids are also plugged in over here, right? So the overlay is appearing 2 times. And that's kind of messing us up. So let's delete this and try another solution. I'm going to copy Control-C, Control-V, this bottom lid, and I'll plug it into the same peg. I'll still create my overlay comp, and I'll plug it in front, and then we can plug this new node into that. We'll call it our selector comp. So now let's go into our tool properties and into our drawing tab. And you'll see that these art layers can be enabled or disabled. So for this node, I only want my overlay to show. So I'm going to get rid of everything else. Now press close. And now for my original lid, I don't want the overlay to show. So I'll get rid of that. Right? And if we go, now if we put our visibility node on, uncheck soft render, you'll see the bottom handle disappears. And that's exactly what we want. Oops, I have an extra node here, so I'll just unplug that. And now you can see our eye is looking great. So let's do the same thing with the top lid. I'm going to move this over. I'm going to Control-C, Control-V. I'll plug it in to this peg, and I'll plug it into our selector comp. I'm going to go into the tool properties. I'll uncheck all of these except the overlay. And then on my original lid, I don't want the overlay to show. And there you go. In our render view, our selectors aren't showing. And then in our OpenGL view, they do show. And they also don't get cut by the eye, so we can select these wherever they are. So the next problem we have to fix is by default, these lids are closed. And we don't really want that. We want the lids to be open because most of our poses are going to be with them open. When we're animating, it's going to be annoying if we have to open these lids every time, right, we use this rig. Let's create another drawing substitution that kind of turns the eyelids on and off. So the first thing we need to do is whatever happens to these bottom lids, I want the exact same thing to happen to the top lids. And a way to do that in harmony is to sync these drawing nodes together. So I'll select these nodes, I'll come up here to this menu and go to nodes. We're going to say sync layer width. And now I'll take a look, I'm in the front eye group and I'm looking for lid top and lid top 1. There it is. So these are actually the same drawing node, so it should be okay if we just select lid top. Press OK, and now you can see if we click on, there's these 2 dots on each of these nodes, and that means they're synced with each other. So success. Okay, let's select our bottom nodes, and we want to add a new drawing substitution. So if I click on this button to make a completely blank drawing substitution, you know, that's not really going to work because now I have no way of selecting my lids. So let's undo that. Instead, I'm going to choose this button and just duplicate. Right? So we have 2 of the exact same drawing swaps. I'll go to drawing swap 2, and remember how we separated our handle on the overlay and everything else on the line art and color art? I'm going to go to my line art layer, just select it and press delete. Then I'll go to my color art, select it, delete. We can even delete this handle as well. Right, so our lower eye is completely gone. Let's go up to our top lid now. If you notice, drawing substitution 2 is still there. Now on the top lid, we're going to go to the line art, delete it. We're going to go to the color art and delete it. And then for our overlay, let's just move our handle. We'll shrink it down. And let's kind of move it over here, out of the way, and fill that in. If we click that handle, it brings us directly to those drawing swaps. So we can click our lid, and now the lids are activated, and we can use them. And if we don't want them, we can just turn them off. So the last thing we'll do is let's reorder these drawing substitutions. So I'll select this one, and I'll go to my camera view and press Control D. That's the shortcut to rename drawings. I'm going to say 2 off. For our second drawing swap, Control D, and we'll say 1 on. There we go. So now by default, the eyelids are off, and we can choose to adjust them whenever we want. Eye looks great. We have the pivot points in the right spot, we have all the deformers where we need them to be, and we have our drawing swaps for our eyelids. So how do we update our other eye group? Because we don't want to do all that work again. So it's pretty easy. We can select this group, go up here, Nodes, Clone, Selected Nodes, Drawings Only. So now we have a clone, not the timing, just the drawing swaps and all the pieces. Come here with Alt, insert that, and hold Alt and drag this out. And let's just delete it. And now you can see we have 2 of the exact same eyes on either side. And that works. If we ever want to make any changes, all we need to do is clone the group that we made the changes in, and just swap it into our node view. Now let's put a peg on top, right here, and we'll call this eyes. That pivot point. I like to put my pivot point for the eyes somewhere in the middle, just like that. There you have it, guys. Our eyes are finished. Now let's move on to the rest of the head. Let's do the head and the jaw now. Remember before how we made our head outline? Well, let's fill it with some color. So let's go up here, create color art from line art, and we'll select our skin color. And on our color art layer, we'll fill that in. It's very important we separate these two. Don't worry if we can't see, we can always deactivate this or wireframe it later on. So now I want to separate this head in half. So I'm going to take my cutter tool. I'll make sure the tip style's round, the marquee is selected, and this button is pressed. That just means I select all the art layers underneath the one I'm currently on. Let's go to our head. And I want to cut the jaw. So if we deactivate this, I want to make sure I cut above the beard because I want that to be included in the jaw. So on our line art layer, we'll go just above the ears, and I'll cut down to the jaw. I'll press Ctrl X, go to my jaw, and press Ctrl V with everything still selected. Right, so it looks the same, but now we've separated our head into two pieces. Right? That's great. Let's adjust these pivot points. For the jaw, I'll have it somewhere up here. I think for the head, I'll have it in the same spot. So I'll just copy that pivot information just like we did before. There you go. We can add another peg on top and connect our jaw. So now if we need to, we can move these pieces together or separately. That was the easy part. Now it gets a little complicated. We're going to grab all this, move it up. Let's add some deformers on these pieces. So I'm going to turn off my jaw, and I'm also going to turn off my eyes so I can see. I'll select my head, go to Animation, Envelope Creator, Create Envelope. I think I want 1, 2, 3, 4, around 5 points, and we'll press Create Envelope. Right, we'll just make this a little smaller. Right, and you see, it doesn't really do what we want, so we have to press this hammer and wrench tool, and now we can kind of go in and adjust these points manually. And sometimes it does this for like curved pieces, so just be aware of that. It's no big deal. So we'll come in, we'll adjust these handles. We can press Alt and just break one side. And I'm trying to line it up somewhere in the middle. Right? You can take your time with this. We really want to make sure we get these points right in the right positions. Okay, nice. I'm happy with that. We can deform this head. Let's do the same thing for the jaw. We still want 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 points. 5 points, create envelope. There we go. Now this one was a little bit nicer, so we can kind of just go in and just tweak it a little bit till we're happy with the position of our deformers. I'm mostly worried about these bottom points because that's probably what I'll be using when I'm animating. Keep that small, and there we go. So now we're getting a little bit of movement, squash and stretch in the face, right? All kinds of things. So one thing I want to show you is see how the lines overlap each other here. I don't want that. I want it to be a seamless transition. And the way we can achieve that is through an auto patch. Included in the exercise files, you'll have this auto patch template. We can grab it and drag it into our scene. And all it is a line art, color art, and an overlay with an auto patch. copy this, and we're going to plug it underneath both of these pieces. Notice the line art, the overlay, and the color art all feed up into the right port. So I'm going to plug the jaw into the right port and the head into the right port. We're going to replace in our main comp, we don't need this, right? And we don't need that. You'll notice not much has changed. Now we actually need to do the auto patching. I'm going to plug my jaw into the left, right? And if we follow the cord, you'll see it goes right down into our auto patch, right? And that's why this works. And I'll move my head into the jaw auto patch. And now you'll see when we go to move, the lines no longer overlap, right? And it's a more seamless transition. Now, if you don't know what an auto patch actually does, don't really worry about it. Using these templates, all you need to remember is whatever you need to auto patch goes into the left, and the actual artwork goes into the right. So our head is coming along. The last thing we can do is let's create a head master peg and plug our eyes into that. We'll copy this pivot information from our head peg. And now we kind of can move all the features at once. Okay, it's coming along. Let's do the beard next. Okay, let's get started on the beard. I also noticed that the outside lines were too thin. I was using the wrong brush. So remember how we wanted the outside lines to be thicker than the inside ones? So I went in and changed that. So now, this is where it's going to get a little complicated. So it's really, really important that we keep a clean node view. I'm going to press Control-R, and let's create the beard. Add and close. We'll throw a peg on top, and I'll connect it in front of the jaw. I'm also going to plug it right into the jaw, because when I select it, I'll automatically select the beard as well. Let's turn that off. We'll use our shape tool. We'll have that smaller thickness, and let's start drawing. So just like the head, it's going to be symmetrical, so we only need to worry about half. Come here, make it a little wider than the face. I'll drop this down, use Alt to kind of drag it out. I'll drop this to the nose, drop this here. And just get this little curve right. Now we can use our cutter trick. We'll cut half. Delete it. The other half we'll Control-C, Control-V, shift up one to the left, flip it, and move it right into place. We'll use our contour editor, turn on snapping. Right, we'll come right in, snap the points together, snap those points together. Right, so we're using the same techniques, and you'll notice that with rigging, a lot of the techniques can be just applied to everything. We'll select, we'll merge, there we go, and that's looking good. We'll turn off snapping for now. So let's fill this in. We'll create color art from line art. We'll select our hair color and fill that in. When we activate the jaw, right, we sort of have the makings of a beard. Think back with the pupil and the eye, right? We wanted the pupil to be cut inside the eye. And we want the same thing with this beard. We want it to be cut inside the jaw. We'll add a cutter and plug it underneath the beard. That's what we want to cut. Now also remember, we had our line art and color art separated. We have that as well, but it's inside this group. Let's go inside and find those nodes. We have the line art here, the color art here. We got to see where it comes out. They all feed into this comp. Okay? So I'm going to pull my color art out and plug it in here to the right. Right now, if we step out of the group, you'll see a right port just opened up. So let's plug that in. Right? And my color art shows up. Also, use the color art to cut the beard. Right? It's kind of reversed, and we'll invert it. Just like that. The beard is stuck inside the jaw. Okay, that's good. But the line art, see how the lines get thin? That's because the line art is behind the beard. Let's go back into our group. We have the line art here, and it comes down into this comp. I'm going to pull it out and put it in front of my color art. And you'll see, just as we predicted, a port opens up in the middle. We'll drag that out and put it in front of the beard. And just like that, it's just like our pupil. But if you notice, we can actually get rid of this port because there's nothing on the overlay, so we don't really need it. And that kind of cleans things up a little bit. So leftmost port, that was the overlay. Let's unplug it. And you'll see nothing happens because there was nothing on that layer. Let's give our beard the same pivot point as the jaw. Right? We'll just copy that pivot information. And there we go. Turn these off, and you'll notice the beard has a couple lines on the side. Let's move this over and add those in. Think of those lines as the eyelids in our eye. Say beard lines 1 and beard lines 2. Select them, press Ctrl-Shift-P to give them each a peg. And just like we plugged the beard right under the jaw, we'll plug these right under the beard. So when we select the beard, we automatically select those lines. Remember, this is our line art. So we'll plug these in front of the beard, but behind the jaw line art. Okay? Boom. Come down to our smaller brush. And I'm just going to draw the lines here. Just roughly like this. I'll grab my pencil editor. And just like we did to the eyebrows, we'll taper these lines a bit. This isn't too bad. So we'll grab the drawing, Ctrl-C, go to our beard lines 2, and press Ctrl-V. We can turn this off. Flip this, move them into the position we want. There we go. Let's add a deformer. I'm going to click the beard lines, come to my deformation toolbar. I'll make sure we have our envelope deformers. And I'm just going to do one right in the middle. Just like this. Click and drag to the center. So I think this is fine. I don't want these beard lines to be too far apart from each other. So one deformer should do it. Also, if you need to reset these deformers, we can click them, select the points, and then press this button here to reset them to their default position. For beard lines 2, click and drag to the center. And that should be good. Activate our beard now and the jaw. and you'll see it clips through, right? I want my lines and my beard to be cut by my jaw. So this cutter over here. So let's pretend this is the pupil and these are the eyelids. We can make a comp. We plug everything into that comp, including our beard, right? And then we put the cutter underneath, just like that, and we'll cut it with our color art. Perfect. We'll move the line art back in front. And there we go. We have the beard finished. Let's do the nose now. So we'll go here, line art, make sure we're on our nose layer. And let's just draw an ellipse right from the center. I'll fill it with some color, just like that. So I want to be able to move this nose. I don't want it to be just a plain drawing substitution, because if we look at our views, right, it kind of gets into these different shapes, and I want to be able to adjust that freely. We're going to grab from our library our auto patch system again, and I'm going to plug it in like this. Right, so now it's activated. And remember, the right port is for our drawings. The left port is for the actual auto patching. And I want to auto patch this nose with my jaw. So I'll take my jaw and I'll plug it in here. Right, you can see it kind of disappeared, but our line is still there. But we want that line to show up. So let's go into our group and see what's going on. We'll see the line art is being auto patched. Right here. And that's why the line isn't showing up. But if you take a look, the overlay, that kind of bypasses the auto patch. So we'll go to the nose, we'll select our black arrow, and on the line art, let's grab our line, Control C, and copy it to the overlay. In our drawing view, we have color art, line art, and an overlay line. So now we can see the line again. So still on our overlay, I'm just going to select a couple points and delete them. And select our peg now, adjust our pivot point. If we line it up like this, it's kind of right in the center. There we go. And now when we turn our nose around, right, we can get different shapes. Now let's create a deformer. I'll select my nose, animation, envelope creator, create envelope. 4 points is good. There we go. With my hammer and wrench tool, I'm going to adjust this. I'll put the points right at the end of my overlay line, just right where I deleted it. We'll adjust these curves as well. So it's around halfway through the line. And the reason I put my points here is because when I'm animating, it's going to be a lot easier to control this overlapping line, right? That looks good, and that's easy to use. Let's do the ears. The nose, I kind of want to put a deformer on the ears. And I'm going to break them up into two pieces, the outer ear and this inner line. R to make another drawing, and we'll say inner ear. Just like that, and we'll plug it in front of our ear. We'll add a peg, and then we'll throw the peg right underneath our ear peg. Turn off this jaw again. I'm going to take my rectangle tool on the line art layer. We'll grab our thicker brush, because it's an outside line. Let's start drawing this ear in. Come a little bit into the head. I'll grab these points. We'll hold Alt to adjust. Okay, now for the inner ear. we'll use our line tool. You can drag the point and you hold control and you can kind of bend it like this with your mouse. Okay. Let's create our color art. We'll fill that in. Save some memory with this rig. I don't think we need to cut this inside the ear just because it's pretty much never going to be moving that far anyway. We should be good like this. Let's go to our ear. We'll add a deformer on it. 4 points should do it. Right, let's start on the hair. Deactivate the head so we can kind of see what we're doing. And let's come down to our breakdown thing again. So I was thinking of separating the hair into around 3 pieces. We probably need a 4th piece for kind of this part of the hair. Also probably going to need like a back piece that goes from one side to the other. Right, and we could probably just pull it down, something like that. So I'm going to grab our hair placeholder and I'll move it in front of everything because this will be the front part of the hair. Just like that. I'll create a comp that says front hair just to keep everything organized, and I'll plug that in front, and I'll plug in my hair here. So I'll need 3 pieces. I'll go, we have hair, hair 1, hair 2, and hair 3, right? It doesn't have to be super specific, I guess, as long as you know which piece is which. And we'll just connect them here. Let's give them their own peg, just like this. Our line tool. Let's start drawing. We'll make sure we'll have our thicker brush. I'm just going to adjust these points. I like to curve my pieces, but it's really up to you at this point. The other piece. And turn on that original guide and kind of match my pieces to exactly what I wanted before. To our 3rd hair piece. And see, if it's a little hard to see, I can press this light table and it kind of grays out everything except the layer I'm working on. So I can kind of see what I'm doing. Finally, our last hair piece. We can turn this off so we can actually see a little bit better. It's going to go something like this. Out. There's also this line in the hair, so I'll go hair detail, create a peg, and then I'll plug it into this piece. Right, and we'll plug that in front. Grab our line tool. We'll make it our smaller thickness, and we'll shove it right through the hair. You can even taper it in to make it look a little bit better. Excellent. Fill in these pieces now, so I'll go to each piece, and I'll just create the color art. Right, and now we can go and fill in our hair color on our color art layer. Nice. Okay, so if we activate the head again, right, our hair is looking pretty good. Notice we have all these overlapping and intersecting lines that we don't have in our design. So let's auto patch the hair pieces with each other. So we'll do these 2 pieces first. I'll grab 2 auto patches, drag them in, And we're going to do something called a cross auto patch. So we'll plug this one in here, right? And you see nothing really happens, but if we step back in Z depth, then you'll see it starts to auto patch. I want it to auto patch both ways when this piece is in front or behind. So we're going to do a cross auto patch. And all we do is we have this piece plugged in here. We're just going to plug in our other node into that auto patch. And there you go. Those lines disappeared. If we bring it forward or back, the lines are still being patched, which is nice. Go to our next piece. So I want to auto patch this piece with this piece and this one. But if you look, we've kind of run out of ports to plug in. So all we got to do is we'll go in this group. I'll copy this auto patch. I'll plug it in to the left, and then I'll insert it to the left here. And that gives us an extra port, and we can plug in this guy. We'll use that same trick, right? We're going to cross auto patch. We need an extra port in the hair 1 and hair 2 as well. So we'll copy our auto patch, move it in, move it up, come in here, copy, move it in, move it up, right? And you can do this as many times as you want. You just got to remember which port goes into which auto patch. And that's why if you always plug it into the left, that's going to be your new port. Good, and let's grab our last one and plug that in. So you can see how things get a little complicated, right? We're keeping things in groups, we're keeping things organized, and we're taking our time, so it makes things a lot easier. This piece, I want to auto patch it with this one. We'll plug that in. We'll go in here, need another auto patch, right? And we're just adding on to our chain. There you go. And I think maybe with this piece as well. So we'll add one here, and we'll add another in this group. And we'll cross those. That's looking good. We have kind of erased all those lines. We can deactivate that, and it's looking pretty much like our design. So for this hair detail, I want it to be cut by this hair. So kind of like the beard, we'll add a cutter. We'll throw it underneath the hair detail. Right? And since this line is black, we can get away with just dragging our point from the bottom and just plugging it into our cutter, right? We inverted it. If this was a different color, we would have problems with the line overlapping, but it's black so you don't notice, which is nice. Let's deactivate this for a sec. You'll see there's a little overlapping line here. So just like we did with the nose, when we auto-patched and had the line on the overlay, we're going to do the same thing with this piece of hair. So we'll come in to our line art. We'll grab this line, Control-C, go to the overlay, Control-V, and now we can hold Control, create a point, and delete the parts that we don't want. Use my pencil editor, and we can taper this line just like that. Okay, let's add our deformers now. I'm going to deactivate these so I can see. We'll select this, we'll go Animation, Envelope Creator, and I want 1, 2, 3, 4 points. Looking okay. I'll activate this hair, and I'll move this point right to where the overlay line ends. We'll adjust this right to this area as well. hair detail. Let's throw a deformer on this as well. I'll click and drag to the center, click and drag to the center. We'll adjust these points. So the other pieces don't have overlapping lines, so it'll be a little easier. We'll just come in, animate, create envelope. 4 points should be good. Same thing, 1, 2, 3, 4 points. This envelope creator is super handy, and it saves so much time. And finally, this last piece of hair. 1, 2, 3, 4. We'll do 4 points again. And that's perfect. That's exactly where we want it. Let's adjust these pivot points. All right, I'll have maybe this over here. This hair, I'll kind of move it somewhere in the middle. Same with this one. Maybe there. And right with the rotate tool, maybe you got to be careful to not rotate the peg, but you can just undo it and try again after. Here. I'm going to grab all of these, press Control P, and I'll call this front hair master. Have the pivot point maybe somewhere in the middle like that. So when I need to squish it or stretch it, I can just pull it up and down. And let's plug in our hair into our head master. So now when we move the head, we're moving everything. It's a little complicated here, but overall our node view is pretty neat, and it's all contained, so it looks good. Now I'll create another hair piece. We'll call it back hair. We don't really need to create a back hair comp because it's just one piece. I'll just plug it in at the back. Oops. I'll just plug it in at the back. Add a peg. Let's draw in the back piece. I'm just going to line it up like that. Just like the head, the other side's going to be symmetrical. So let's just worry about this. We'll select our cutter. Right, all these settings are right. Marquee tool. We'll come around halfway. Delete it. Select Control C, Control V. Shift up 1 to the left. Flip. Right, so again, all the same steps. We've done this before. We're just applying it to different parts of the body. Right, back to our lasso select. We'll turn on snapping. Press K to see the lines. Match those up. Match that up. And let's make this one piece. I'm going to turn off the light bulb so I can kind of see. Create our line art. Create our color art. Skin. And fill. Oops. I meant hair. And fill. Select that pivot point. We'll move it right down like this. Right, and I want to see just my hair now to add a deformer, but I don't want to turn everything else off, so I'll just press Enter, add a display, and I'll just plug this in here. And then I can just go to Display 1, and now it just shows me my hair. Go Animation, Create Envelope, 4 points, oops, 1, 2, 3, 4, maybe 5 points this time. And adjust this just a tiny bit. We can go back to our other display. We can unplug that. And I'll plug this into the head master. So I'll actually drag this hair over to my other hair. right, to keep things all together. I want to auto patch this piece with the back hair. So I'll drag in my auto patch, plug that in. And then hair 3, I'm going to insert it in there, and I'll go in to my hair 3 group, add another auto patch, move it up, move it in, and I'll plug in my back hair here. Okay, so now let's do our little overlay trick. We'll go to the line art, Control C, overlay, Control V, and now we'll kind of just delete these points, just like that. Actually, looking at this hair now, I need to draw a few more pieces. Even though it's not visible in the front view, if we look, there's a couple pieces sticking out behind the hair. Let's draw those in now. I'll go R, I'll press back hair 1, back hair 1, and back hair 2. We'll add pegs, and then we'll connect those two together, and we'll insert it underneath our main back hair peg. Let's rename this back hair tail. We'll plug both these in at the end of the comp. Right, and since I don't have the artwork here, let's just go to our second view, and we'll draw it in that way. So I'll go here. I'll just quickly make like little teardrop shapes, and I can just grab these drawings, Control C, copy them here, and we'll just shift them over, rotate them. So I want to move both of these back to this position, but I don't want to move them on the pegs, right? Because that's animation. We don't want to put any animation on these pegs just yet. So I'll select these drawings, my black arrow select, and I'll press this button here. Apply to visible drawing layers. I'll select both, and I'll literally just move it somewhere here behind the head. Grab our display. I'll plug it in here. Display 1. We can uncheck this box. Let's fill in our color. There you go. And fill that in. These pegs up. Put a deformer on each of these. And so I'm going to create a temporary comp and plug it into my display. And then I'll plug in my back hair all into this comp, just temporarily so I can see it all together. I'm going to grab my auto patch, plug that in here, plug that in there, and I want to auto patch my back hair with these pieces. So I'll plug this in, plug that in, and in my back hair I'm going to go into this group and create 2 more auto patch slots. Right, plug them in. 1 for each hair piece. 1, 2. Okay, let's get rid of this comp. You see, if we drag it out, you'll see it's all cut and it's looking pretty good. Let's undo that. Last thing, we need to change these pivot points. So I'll come here with my display node so I can see this. I'll move this guy over here. Right, for the back here, I'll kind of put it somewhere in the middle. And there we go. So now we have all the pieces of the hair that we need to get our other views later on. The pivot points are in the right spot. Everything's being auto-patched. We have those overlapping lines, and everything has deformers on it. Pretty close. Let's finish off the head in the next video. Okay, so we're almost here. You can see our node view has come a long way. If you look over here outside the head comp, right just behind it, I added a neck. So I use a shape tool to make these rectangles. I cut this neck shadow just like the eye. And then I use this envelope creator to create some deformers on each of these pieces. And of course, they each have a peg with their pivot point. So we've done all this before, nothing new. And I used to like to do it inside the head comp, but I guess outside makes it a little bit easier for things we're going to do later. In the head, let's kind of organize this a little more. We already have a nice hierarchy because we've been connecting these pieces. But I'm going to add a backdrop. So I'm going to select, these are my hair nodes. I'm going to go Insert, Backdrop, and it kind of just groups them together. So I can move them together, and it gives me a nice visual of where things are in this rig. Label it hair, and we can even make it a different color. Let's make the hair orange. I'm going to select these. I'm going to label this nose. Right, I like to have all the pieces labeled. So these are the eyes. Right? This is kind of just my personal preference to make everything nice and neat. We'll select here. This will be the beard. We can make the beard brown. I'm going to leave some more room for the mouth because that's going to be a whole bunch of other nodes later. And if you select this little arrow, you can kind of reposition these backdrops without moving the nodes inside, right? Because if you select the backdrop, the nodes move with it, so that can kind of get annoying. Well, here, this will be the head and jaw. Right, let's reposition. These are the ears. This is also a good time to go through each peg and just make sure that you remembered to set those pivot points. So for example, these beard lines, right, I forgot to set those pivot points. So we'll set them now. Right, the beard's fine, the mouth, the jaw, the head. Ears are good. Right, everything else looks fine. We'll go to our headmaster. I'll create a new peg on top, and this will be called our head and neck peg. Because we want to be able to move just the head or the neck. And what I like to do with this is I like it to be in the same spot as just my neck. So I'll select this yellow box, and we'll copy that pivot information. Okay, we're not going to plug the neck in just yet. What we're going to do, let's move this out of the way. We'll select our head master peg and everything underneath it, right to that head comp. And I'm going to press Control G to group my head together. Look how much space that saves, right? It also helps that that all these nodes aren't on screen at the same time, so it does make the rig kind of work a little bit faster. Rename this head full. And now let's grab our neck and attach it right underneath the head and neck peg. Comp is getting pretty cluttered. Let's select this yellow box and let's move this underscore a little bit just so the comp is bigger, right? And we have some more space. Okay, and that's it, guys. That head is done. We can step up through the hierarchy, right? We can move the whole head. We can move the head and neck. And that's looking great. You still need to go in and do the mouth, but we can do that later. The next section, we'll do the torso and the arms. After, we'll do the legs. So we're getting one step closer to finishing this front view of our character.